One of the cool things you can do in After Effects is have a shape change over time when you use masks on it. So I'll show you a quick example here, then I'll show you how you can use complex shapes with the aid of Photoshop. So here we've got a new project, a new comp with just a solid layer in it, and I'm going to add a mask to that. Now when you have the layer selected and you click on the shape tool, then when you draw on this layer, you're not drawing a shape layer, you're adding a mask to an existing layer. So notice how the mask layer popped up here inside this solid layer. So that's a mask. That's a mask inside this solid layer that's masking that part of the solid. Okay. When you do that, when you add this mask layer by drawing there, it adds these four elements here, these four properties, and the mask path is the one that we're interested in here. We're going to want to change this shape over time by keyframing the mask path. So I'm going to turn on keyframes for it, and that'll add a keyframe for that shape. Now if I were to go farther in here, and if I were to just select one of those little dots there, one of those little vertices using the selection tool. By the way, we saw what I did there. When the mask is selected, you've got squares there. When you have squares showing up, it means you're going to move the entire mask around. But when you click away from the mask and just click on the layer itself, then these little vertices show up as dots, and you can control them individually. There you go, something like that. So here we are controlling these things individually, and since we're changing them at a new location with the keyframes turned on, then these guys will then change over time, like so. That's ugly, but you see what I mean. I'm going to get rid of this keyframe by clicking on it and then pressing delete. Let's say I want to put a different shape there. That's a very specific shape. If I go to the shape tool and change over, let's say, to a polygon, I want to add a polygon keyframe there. Now I've got the mask path selected, and then if I draw here, you'd think it would make a polygon, right? Do you think it would add a keyframe there? There's my pentagon right now. Holding down the space bar to kind of slide it in place there. There you go. And I let go, and what does it do? It adds another mask. It didn't add a keyframe there. It assumes that you want to add another mask. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. But I can take care of this. So I'm going to open up this second mask that I added, click on the mask path, go Control or Command C to copy that attribute right there. Select this mask and have the mask path selected so that I've got the keyframes turned on. This current time indicator is here. Now I go Control or Command V. I'm taking keyframes from this mask here and pasting them up there, and the pentagon is covering it. It's causing it to change, but that pentagon's still sitting there because this mask is still there. So I'll delete that mask now. So now that that's how you can create a shape that changes over time. You see how that changes there? Notice how this, see that little vertex there that's different than the rest? That's called the first vertex. Notice that in the rectangle, the first vertex is in the upper right hand corner. It's a concentric circle. If I click on the mask, it'll be a concentric square. If I go to the pentagon, you'll see that it's a concentric square at the top. If I click on the layer itself, then you can see it turns into a circle. What I want to do is I want to change the first vertex. I want the first vertex to be in the upper right hand corner there, and the first vertex to be, I'd say, right there for this guy, so that maybe this shape will change a little differently. I'm not sure. We'll just try that and see what happens. So I'm going to change. I like that it's there, but I'm going to change for this one. So when I make a change by changing the first vertex, I need to be on the keyframe. So I'm going to navigate to the keyframe. Now we're on the keyframe. I want to make this the first vertex. So I want to select that vertex, and typically the way you do that is by marquee selecting, by taking your selection tool and then dragging a marquee around this. But when it's got a circle like that, when the vertex is a little dot, that means when you drag, you're going to move the entire layer around. So you need to select the path like that, and then now you can marquee select that vertex. And I can right click on that selected vertex. Notice the rest of them are hollowed out. This is the only selected vertex. Right click on that, say Mask and Shape Path, Set First Vertex. And now I've changed the first vertex to that corner. We'll watch how that morphs, if that morphs differently. Yeah, it morphs differently. I'm not sure if that's better or worse, but it morphs differently, so you get a sense of how that works. Alright, I'm going to delete this mask and start from scratch. I'm going to talk about working with unusual shapes. So this, I managed to move the layer around a couple times because as I was dragging it around to give you those examples, I'll reset it so now everybody's back in the starting position. Over here in Photoshop, I've got this fish, and I want to make a path out of this fish shape. And a path in Photoshop is the same as a mask inside After Effects. So I want to make a path here. The way you make a path is by making a selection. And the best kind of a selection that you can make to turn into a path is the selection that goes outside, around the outside edges of the fish. If you use the quick selection tool, for example, which is kind of the standard tool, and select from inside, what you're going to get is probably more than just one path. You'll get multiple small paths. There might be a couple of 1 or 2 pixel, 1 or 2 vertex paths in here if you select from the inside. And so when you've got an object that's got easy boundaries like this, particularly a graphic like this, it's best if you're going to try to make a path, you want it to be a single path. And if you select from the inside, lots of times you get like little 1 or 2 vertex paths. So we're going to select from the outside here. I'll start over with starting from scratch. And instead of using the quick selection tool, I'll use the magic wand, and I'm going to click outside it. The magic wand looks for a solid color, looks for a color, so it's going to find everything that's white and make a selection. Now what it's selecting is it's selecting the white. It's not selecting the fish, it's selecting all the white area around it, including this border here. And then one little problem is that border is one path, and then the fish shape is the second path, and you want only one path. So the kind of the way around this little workaround, which is not elegant, and maybe there's a better way to do it, but here's the inelegant approach to this workaround. Double click on the layer to convert it into a standard layer instead of a background layer. Now that that selected area is active, it still is active, make a new mask by clicking on this little mask button down at the bottom. That adds a mask. It's the invert. It's showing what you want to protect the fish, not the background. So you need to invert the mask. The mask is active. You can tell it's active because it's got a border around it. So just press Control or Command I, and that inverts the mask, and now you're masking the fish, which is what you want. Now you need to select that fish, select that mask by Control or Command clicking on the mask, and that now makes another selection around the fish without selecting the border, which is important. Now you have one selection, one continuous selection rather than 2 selections or more. So that's a good thing. Now you need to convert that into a path. Right now it's just a bunch of marching ants. You need to convert it into a path, which is actually a mask. It's just a bunch of a pen tool created path. So you go over to Paths, the Paths panel there, click on that. And at the bottom of the Paths panel, there's a new little button down here that says Make a Path. It looks like a mask. If you look at it closely, it looks like it's got a couple of handles and dots and things like that. So you're going to make a path, click on that, and there's the path. And I've told my students that they should then save this and then Control C to copy it or Command C to copy it, but you don't need to save it. That maybe was an older way of doing it. I've discovered you don't need to save it. There's that path there. It's active because it's blue. So do Control or Command C to copy it. And now you've copied that path into the clipboard. Go back to After Effects. Make sure this layer is active. It just has to be active. It doesn't have to be a mask on or anything like that. Just be active. And do Control or Command V to paste. And there's our little fish. How nice. Let's go back to Photoshop. All right, I'm going to want to look at this other image that I want to morph to this other image, like we morph from the square to the pentagon. We're going to morph from the fish to the bird. Now, this is the complex bird. If I select just the white, I'm not going to get these area between its feet or here between its foot and its wing. Those will not be selected. If I add to the selection by clicking on this little button to add to the selection and click there, that will create 2 more paths. That's not what I want. I don't want to create 2 more paths. So you have to have one path. So I'm going to kind of manipulate this image to avoid having that happen. I'll go and we'll press the Z key to turn on the zoom tool. I'm going to marquee select the zoom in here. I'm going to open these guys up so that when I use the magic wand, it will be able to get inside here and make this just one selection. So I get my little eraser tool and I just open this up a little bit. So now when I use the magic wand, it'll slip right through there and select that. And now I need to break this poor bird's toes here by opening up that path as well. So now when I use the path, meaning just that little hole there. Now when they're open up, now when I use the magic wand, it'll select all the way inside there. I'll zoom up by pressing Control or Command 0 or back out to full and click on the magic wand. Now I'm going to click on the white area, and now if you look closely, you can see the marching ants go inside the feet there. So we'll have it be only one selection. That's a good thing. Otherwise it would have been messy. Okay, we've got our selection. We've got to do the same routine as before. So we'll click on layers, double click on the background to make it a regular layer, click on the mask tool to make a mask, invert the mask by pressing Control or Command I, Control or Command click on the mask to make the selection, go to Paths, click on the new path tool, Control C to copy that path. It's kind of tedious, I know, but here we go. And now here's the trick. I need to open up the mask layer. Need to make sure the mask path is active. I've keyframed the fish, maybe a couple seconds into the comp. I drag this forward a few seconds to the point where I want to add the bird. And now that this keyframes are turned on, I have the current time indicator in a new location. That means if I controller command V to paste the bird, it'll put a new keyframe there. So control V, there's the bird. And now it will morph from one to the other. It might not be elegant because of the first vertex, but we'll fix that in a second. Ooh, got kind of squished there. Well, here's the deal. If I look at the fish, I'm going to navigate to this keyframe. You want to be on the keyframe when you change the first vertex. So I'm going to go navigate to that keyframe by using this little triangle here. I'm looking, there's the first vertex for the fish, and the first vertex for the bird is up there, kind of awkwardly placed. So I'm going to put the first vertex for both animals kind of on the right-hand side here. That way it might work a little better. So I need to select one of these vertices, and if I were to drag here, marquee select, because they're squares, then I'm not going to move the layer around, so I can do that. I've now marquee selected that one vertex, right click on it, mask and shape path, the first vertex. Now we'll go to the fish, and I'm going to navigate to the fish's keyframe so I don't add another keyframe when I change the vertex. Here they're squares as well, so I don't need to, if I had this on, it would be that I'd be selecting the entire layer and move the layer around. I don't want to do that. But if I have the path selected, then it'll be squares. And if I just marquee select that guy, notice how all the rest of the guys are hollow now, meaning this is the only one that's selected. Right click on it, mask and shape path, set first vertex. And now, let's see how that works. Ooh, look at that. Muy bueno. That's good. Let's check it out. Very nice. So now what I'm going to do is one other little thing that I've asked some students of mine to do, and that's to use the Mask Interpolation tool. And so I'm going to go up to Window, and then this thing called Mask Interpolation right there. It's already selected in my case. That's this little panel down here. And I want to use a feature inside here called Polyline. It tends to make the process even smoother than you just saw, although hard to beat what just happened there. That was pretty good. But what you do inside Mask Interpolation is to switch the matching method to Polyline. Make sure both of the keyframes are selected. If they're not selected, and you click on Apply here, you're going to get a message saying, you need to select two consecutive keyframes, buddy. So, okay, we'll select those guys by clicking on the mask path property name, and that automatically selects all keyframes inside any property that you click. And I've got Polyline selected. I click Apply, and it adds a whole boatload of keyframes here. And now I'm going to turn off the paths so you don't see those anymore, and see how this guy's morph here. Lovely. There we go. It's RAM previewing, so it's a little slow, but you know, that's pretty cool. And of course, you could change the colors and things like that by using, let's say, hue saturation or some other effect. You can add a stroke to it or whatever other kind of effects you want to make. But that, folks, is how you can cause shapes to change in After Effects and use Photoshop to help you make very, very precise path selections on objects that might have complex looking edges.